So Meris released the Enzo, and it's cool. And I have one on the way right now. I have honestly no idea how I plan to use it, but I'm too curious to not at the same time. But there was some people that I immediately saw that were disappointed is a strong word, but maybe a little disappointed that it wasn't essentially a modulation type Mobius Killer. And I get it. We all want that trifecta thing that Strymon was doing with the Big Sky Timeline and Mobius. But I figured there was a really interesting topic to talk about along the lines of it, because it is the third of their sort of X series of kind of like multi-effects units. And everyone was thinking maybe it would be kind of like the Mobius and be the modulation, just Mobius Killer of sorts, which would only make sense. But in traditional Meris fashion, they went against the grain and they made something different and interesting. I gotta say, I got it because I love the current X series style of pedals they're doing from an interface perspective, the banks and the navigation. It's all there. It makes sense to me. I understand it now, and it's fluid. I was actually a little afraid of the smaller pedals because of how much stuff they packed into it with all the layers, but no screen. So I'm super into the format that they're doing right now. But back on track, like I said, I think a lot of folks were expecting a sort of like Mobius type. And there were some folks that were disappointed whenever they saw that. Frankly, I'm stoked. I have no idea what I'm going to do with this thing because it basically turns your guitar into a synth, but that's never stopped me from doing weird things that feel really fun and creative and inspiring. If anything, it actually is kind of nice. It breaks the mold of the need for just like a full-on modulation box with all the bells and whistles. But one thing that I wanted to touch on that I think a lot of people have missed. It may be a unpopular opinion, or perhaps it's just an unknown opinion. I would actually like to say that Meris has already released a modulation box or Mobius Killer, and it's found tucked away in this guy, as well as the Mercury X. Kind of the same concept applies, but I just figured I'd use the LVX for example here. I'm sure many folks who actually have this pedal know that you can apply any of the modulation effects to your dry guitar, and while it might not have been a common thought to think, oh, cool, let me use this for modulation, it can totally be used for modulation. I bought 2 of them. There's 2 of them on my board right now. The initial thought was actually, I love dual delays stacked on top of each other, but then I was just like, I can totally just make modulation presets as well, use my RJM controller to just go and access different presets that I make that are just for modulation, and then I can have presets that are also dedicated to dual delay stuff stacking into each other. And so some people may scoff at me saying that. Some people might be like, wait, what? But not only is it something that I think is just worth noting, I think it's something that's worth like heavily considering. Like I said, I bought 2 of them, and so far it's been amazing. Not that I don't miss the Mobius, it just does different things. But the LVX and the Mercury as well, they can do like all the same things. You just have to think about it in a different way. As far as I'm concerned, it kind of does more. And what I mean by that is it has the whole like signal path routing thing, although most of the modulation to take place in the way that I'm referring to would be on the pre-dry. You can technically stack things in a different, interesting and intricate way, but like you can have multiple effects on at the same time. And there's so many folks like waiting for a Mobius MX when here's the LVX that does that already, but it's a delay machine as well. Like I can literally run, not to the same degree as what an actual full-blown Mobius MX would do, where it's like this whole algorithm with this whole algorithm, but like there's pitch effects, and I can also run that with modulated effects. I can also run that with preamp effects. I can also run that with dynamic effects. And so it's kind of crazy. Like same concept with like Chroma Console does the same thing. This is doing that. And I already have it. It's in my delay pedal. So without going on saying like more of the same just over and over again, I think it's worth having 2 of these. I know that might be a crazy thought, but you can also get away with this concept I'm referring to with just 1 of these as well. So the way that I'm going to showcase this is I've actually made a preset pack, like a batch one, kind of like my other stuff I've been making. But the way that I built it is on top of my new, pretty much one of my favorite BBD dotted delays, but the mix is just turned all the way down. So with any one of these, you can use it as a dedicated modulation pedal. if that's how you have this and that's how you have it on your board set up and you bought it with that intent. But if you only have one LVX, but you still need it to operate as a traditional delay, you can just turn the mix knob up, and it's my BBD dotted delay that I designed as well. Now, there's like a couple of caveats where, like, the way I designed my delay was with a certain amount of compression on it as well to cause it to ebb and flow with your guitar in a certain way. And some of these presets for modulation are an actual compressor. Or one of the drawbacks, I guess you could say a drawback, is that let's say you turn the chorus on or the tremolo. I noticed that the dB drops just a smidge, and so I actually offset that using the dynamic gain just with no threshold. And I was able to turn it up and make it as loud as I wanted to compensate. So it was no issue. But in those scenarios, since it's overriding what my normal compressor is doing for my normal delay, it might sound like a little different, but for the most part, you're still getting the delay if that's what you want. And you can just finesse it to your liking per preset based on how I made these modulated effects. But that's just kind of an idea to give you some of the flexibility of what all this thing can do. So like I was saying, I mean, I think some folks were disappointed. Frankly, I'm stoked. Like, since I feel like I already have that in this LVX, I feel like I'm getting something completely different and wild and bizarre, let alone that the Enzo, I mean, I'm sure I'll make something on it or make some presets on it or something, but the fact that you can plug a MIDI in to that and it becomes the brains of a synthesizer is crazy. So they're over here just innovating. Meanwhile, we're just stuck over here like, give me my Mobius replacement. But look, I get it. Like I said, I wanted that too. But like I said, I think it's tucked away in here, and I think there's some gold to draw out of the thing you already have. But also, if I might encourage you, I mean, you'll hear some stuff later on that I'll probably be stacking delays. I think it's magical. But I think you can get away with the whole dual delay thing enough with some of these, algorithm builds like that I've done or that you could do on your own that sound like a dual delay, but there's still something kind of different and magical having two delays run into each other that I love. So is this a Mobius killer? I guess it depends on what you define as kill. Look, I 90% made that title because of the clickbait concept, but I do kind of stand by it. Like, if kill just means like it takes it off your board. Yeah, it took it off my board because I wanted a delay machine at the core, but I also wanted to be able to accomplish some of my basic modulation, which was really like tremolo, kind of destroyer kind of stuff, and then my wide effect, which I've got like 5 different wide effects on this thing, and they all sound awesome. So that's my whole spiel. I think Meris is like light years ahead. They're like 10 years ahead of what we're thinking. And like whenever I'm like, oh, I need this thing, I'm like, I already have it. And they're just over here innovating, trying to give us supplies for the next 20 years because maybe we'll find that we have all morphed into robots and use our guitars like synthesizers. I mean, like I said, I got one, so we'll see what happens. So anyways, let's jump into some of these presets. I'm going to showcase them. There's more in this preset bundle than I have traditionally had, and I'll explain some of these as we go. But there's a few things that are just not just modulations, like filter, EQ stuff, and doing some other kind of interesting and cool things, but it's just a basic pack. And I say basic because, once again, like all the other Meris stuff, I'm sure things are going to come up where there is more complex designs that will come up. There's hold functions that could be discovered. But I was like, before I absolutely blow my brains out trying to think of everything that needs to be done, let me get a basic pack accomplished that's not too complicated, and it's giving you some great core bones sounds. So here they are. All right, we've got the LVX here. This is my LVX number 2. And this is kind of the powerhouse for all of my modulation, but also the dual delay stuff. That's really why I got it. And then a fun secondary aspect is the fact that it also dubs as a modulation powerhouse. So just really quick, I don't want to start with this one. This is, whatever, random one, Chorus Lite. Chorus Lite, yeah, that's it. And, I'll kind of quickly show it, but every single one of these, like I mentioned, has my BBD dotted eighth delay set at like absolute 0 mix, because I built it with my intention of using this as a modulation pedal. But for those who don't have a second one, which is, I would assume, a majority of people, you can simply turn the mix up to your preference and there will be a BBD delay for you. Now, also, it's obviously worth noting that like you probably are going to want to use a variety of different delays. That is going to kind of be in your hands to set how you want. The main thing I wanted to do here was deliver a lot of just core bones, awesome modulation presets. But, you know, any of these that you want, if you only have one LVX, you'll have to kind of pick your favorite delay and then just go and look at those settings and copy them over to have that specific modulation with the particular delay that you want. Also, it is worth noting, I am, like the last video, actually on my Tone X's at the moment. It's pretty late tonight and I cannot play on my loud amps. So that is what I'm using on the upcoming Tone Factor version 2 Tone X amps, and I'm particularly using JMI, my JMI on the left and my Blankenship Twinplex through the Supro cab on the right side. So if you like those, they will be coming in a matter of just a couple of weeks. Okay, so this is just quickly what this effect is. Once again, not the focus, I just want to showcase the delay. Let's go ahead and speed that up to like a slightly more interesting delay, because I have it set, you know, to be able to be controlled by my RJM. So that's the idea. Every single one of these has that BBD delay, and I picked that one over the general dotted from the first batch just because I'm just a big fan of it right now. The EQ is really nice. It's really percussive. It's doing the charming BBD thing. It just sounds great. So all of those are there with the mix at 0. So you can just turn that up to your taste and save the preset as you like. Okay, so if we start at the top, we've got Barber, and it's a Barberpole, and I just kind of found a really cool setting that I liked and ran with it. I'll start by playing it by itself and then throw some effects on. And for reference, all right, Bend is using a LFO to actually cycle a bending sort of note that it's just really cool. You'll hear it here. So here's just like a little bit of reverb with it. Also, I was just wondering why my tone was so bright, and it's because my compressor settings got completely changed in my pedal board case. All right, now it'll sound right. And just for reference, just to make sure you are hearing this correctly, here is what that is completely dry. The cool thing I actually want to bring attention to is it doesn't sound like much until you throw a delay on or other effects afterwards. You hear the bend interact with those things, and it's much more obvious. All right, from a moment ago, Chor Lite over here. It's a pretty straightforward chorus that I threw together. Here it is. Okay, comp squeeze is awesome because there's a compressor in this thing. I mean, come on. And it acts as, at least the way I've been using it, is as a secondary compressor to stack on top of my normal one. And, why would you do that? Well, definitely for slide. I'm a big fan of like the super squash tone. My tone press can do that. There's 2 compressors in the one box, so I can do stuff like that. But there's still something to say about having something after your drives like this. It's a whole different experience, and I'll show you what that sounds like. I'm gonna grab a slide. Okay, so let's just hear it by itself for a sec. I'll just do like a single gain stage. Here's without it. Also, worth noting, you can totally turn the gain down. If it's gaining up too much for you, you can turn it down a bit so that it's a bit cleaner in the dynamics. Just turn that gain down a little bit. For me, I wanted it a little louder because I can dig in really hard and it's not going to crush my dynamics too much beneath my big guitar if I'm just kind of sending it with slide or something. So here it is with slide. Well, I guess actually here's slide without it first. Pretty straightforward and pretty awesome. Destroyer, oh boy. Okay, so some people are going to judge this harshly. This is, with the time I had, as close as I could get to a sort of Destroyer thing. Now, what I was looking for was something that gave it that wave at that certain frequency that the Destroyer has, and I matched it in terms of speed, but in terms of like the way it wiggles, I was limited in my option. I'd use an LFO to get it to move that way, and then I had to use a series of different effects that it is moving to make it do that. So here it is by itself. So you can hear that wiggle in there. So once again, very subtle. That's how I like it. This is it with effects. That's where you hear the more dramatic experience. And I think some people will want to hear this as well. Let me get to the right tempo or a close tempo. So like I said, it's not exactly the same. It's a bit different. It has other cool aspects to it that are just different and maybe a different new thing that you might enjoy. But either way, that's as close as I could get it for now. And I like it. I'm going to be using it for stuff. It's really cool. The way it wiggles is charming. It's kind of more aggressive in some ways, but you don't notice it till the other effects are on like I showed. Double chorus is using 2 different forms of chorus-esque modulation. One is an actual chorus. The other one is like a pitch. So this is what that sounds like, dry. Okay, Dyna Flange, So that one's a little wild. First of all, it is a dynamic flanger, hence the name. It is also worth noting that the more input it has, the wilder it reacts. So let me show you a dry example. The reason I built this is because in my album Field, my instrumental album, the song Forward, on the big ending part, there's a slide part. I'll show you. It's sick. It was a total accident finding the effect in the Polymoon that bends. It's a dynamic flanger in there as well. It bends with dynamics. And so the more you dig in, the more it dips. And using it on slide was so cool. Using it for something like rhythm, not the best, because especially the more aggressive you get, the bigger it dips, and it just sounds crazy going into your effects. It sounds like the tuning's all out of whack. So here's an example. It's not bad there, but let's add more gain. Now, I think that sounded pretty cool, but you have to consider, like I said, the more effects that are on it, that's where it starts to show itself being kind of weird. Here's an example. So this might be one of those things that you don't use that way if you're doing like rhythm. Don't do a bunch of heavy effects or something. It sounds kind of cool dry by itself. It's very active, maybe even for like octave stuff. But my purpose, the way I built it, was with slide. Let me show you with that. Now, you can exaggerate this by giving it more input. That was my first gain stage. Fairly clean. Here's with just a boost on top of that. And then the more gain I give it, once again, it kind of dips it more. I mean, come on, how cool is that? Like, I'm not bending my finger, I'm just digging in, and the harder I hit, the harder it bends. How freaking cool is that, man? I love that effect. So it just like reminds me of whenever I was recording that, and I love that song. So anyways, check it out. All right, Dyna Lite. This one is incredibly subtle. So basically, you'll hear on the vibrato, it's based on the same thing, but this one instead is using more of an envelope to react to your guitar, but it's also the window with which it reacts is very small. Otherwise, the tuning would just get crazy. So this is one of those that you might not fully hear it until you turn an effect on, like some of the others. Some of you have not heard it yet. And then some of you are like, okay, yeah, I hear the warble. It's really small. Now, like I said, let's turn on this. Let's go without it first. Here's some delay, a smaller amount of reverb. And since it is dynamic, let's add a little more gain and it will be further exaggerated. But for me, the thing that I'm hearing, it's starting to kind of move underneath the other effects, and it's causing this warble, this almost like cinematic-y tape warble underneath the other effects. But anyways, like I said, here's more gain. So anyways, like I said, I'll probably use this as one that is, you know, like you could leave it on a whole song and somebody might not be able to pin and know that this is happening. But if you took it away, they're like, dude, where did your like really cool tone go? To me, it's one of those things. And sometimes those are really cool. They add vibe, they add feel, but you can't always pin your finger on it because it's not always about having this like 100% depth vibrato thing. You know what I mean? All right, Flange Wide. I almost didn't include this. Then I was playing a set live and you turned it on and I was like, oh my gosh, this is actually great. So here it is by itself. I imagine you can hear there, like what it does to the pronunciation of the top end of my picking is so cool. I loved that about it. Flutter, this is, I was thinking it up and I was like, dude, you know what? The LVX can totally do the tremolo reverb thing. The polymoon effect has an ability to diffuse and get verby. So I'm going to do something like that. And here it is. Little delay, little reverb. I'm also going to turn on my SCF TC Electronic Chorus, just mostly for the sake of width and the BBD chip. Here we go. Yeah, I mean, I feel good right now after that. Glitch, here we go. It uses the granular thing. That one was a hard one to pin down, man. It's a wild machine. So I found something that kind of felt like ballpark, what would be usable. Some people are like, usable? Listen to that. Yeah, there's a few ways you could probably use that, but to me, it's just kind of like a weird one, a layer thing, or just like a cool specific part kind of thing. Lo-fi tape. Basically, it's just using tape and EQing things in a certain way to be super chill. So here's that. Gonna turn on SCF Chorus. Sizzle, this is a very simple one, and it is doing something that I love, and it's very obscure. It's using the tape, I forget what it's called. I think it's like static or something. And if you use it in a certain way, it sounds really cool. The disclaimer, the way that I saved this was rolling off a little top end just to control some of it. But I can't lie that I like the way it sounds wide open too, because some of that staticky sizzle in your face feels really cool. So just bear that in mind. You can go into the high end and just roll off a little bit of it, or add it back since the preset is saved with it rolled down. This is actually going to be with it wide open. So what you receive will be a little warmer, and you can open it if you want. Tape Echo is using a bit of a width experience and using the tape that I used on some of the other presets. So here's that. Here's by itself, nice and dry. All right, Tape Lite is kind of the original version of that one we just did, but it is a pretty chill tape. The warble of it can get really deep really fast, and so I wanted one that was very applicable and never got too out of hand. Of course, you can always exaggerate it, but this is a subtle tape. Yeah, you really hear it on that low F chord there. You hear that subtle dipping. Let's go ahead and turn some effects on. You'll hear that more. All right, next we have a Tape Warble, and it is essentially a more exaggerated version of Tape Lite. It's kind of pushing some of the other modifiers a little bit more. I gotta say, that one's probably one of my more favorite of the tape options. It's really cool. I think it is also doing a subtle EQ modification. I think all the tape ones are cutting a little low, cutting a little high, or maybe just cutting a little high. Either way, if you're just like, hey, I like this tape effect, but I don't want it changing my tone, you can just open up those highs and lows. Okay, top cut. This is a unique one. I was kind of on the hunt for something to make my single coil lipstick tube pickup guitars not just sound a little warmer, but kind of help bring out some like mid-range character. So I'm going to grab that guitar really fast and I'll kind of show you what this is actually doing. There is a whole full-blown filter EQ system in here that does a whole variety of things. And one that I wound up liking was the top cut. So I don't know if it's practical per se to rely on this as your means of altering your single coil tone, but if it's something that you want, it is there, and it can help bring out some more mid-range property. So this is my Paleo Tele-Electro, we're jokingly calling it, or maybe I am, but either way, here it is. And this is what it sounds like with just like a sort of like cleaner, like first-ish gain stage. I say cleaner, first gain stage. Gonna turn up the gain a little bit and maybe a little bit more reverb. So that's the idea. It can bring out more mid-range character. It's doing a few different things within one setting. It is by all accounts a low pass, but it's doing something else with some resonance to help bring out mid-range character. So it's feeling great. It's doing the job. All right, next we have a straight up tremolo, and it's the fast tremolo variant. And then the slower tremolo. All right, this is Vibrato Lite. It is a interesting effect. It's not, okay, so if you were to go into modulation, you're not really going to see what's going on. It's actually found in filter and then using like LFO movement to create the vibrato effect. So if you're trying to make a change, you will find that in the actual modifiers section where you can change the LFO amount. Essentially, that's going to be where you're going to find that. right, now we're starting to get into the wide effects. We'll start all the way up with big. Let's hear it dry by itself. First of all, off. All right, next is wide medium. I think wide light and medium are using a similar approach. Wide big is using a completely different approach of effect to accomplish that really big width. All right, and then we have the light version. Here is with it off. So it's just awesome. They all kind of function separately in slightly different ways and really cool ways. But I really enjoy what they're doing. If you haven't experienced much of a wide effect, it might not seem like much to you, but it's really a feel thing and what it brings out in your guitar. So there are 3 different versions, so have fun with that. All right, Chorus Detune is a more exaggerated version of this one over here, Detune Lite or LT. But yeah, this one's really cool. It's much more aggressive. Here it is by itself. All right, Detune LT or Detune Lite is probably one of my favorites. I love the application of this kind of pitch detuning experience. It is a really cool, I don't know if you could call it chorus, but it kind of comes off to me like that. And that's all of them. That is the last one. There are 25 of these, which, I mean, it's a lot considering what my other normal Meris preset packs come with. But since some of these, you know, like I think of the top cut, you know, it's very niche, very specific, not going to be for everybody. So there was just a lot of stuff that I was kind of like, well, I want to include this. I think it's useful, but it's not, you know, what everybody needs. So it's 25 different presets that might be some people's cup of tea and then maybe not for others. So there's just a lot to pick from. And like I said, all of these have the BBD mix where you can just turn it up if you need a little delay with it, if this is your only pedal, and you can kind of just figure out how to make that work with the other delays and copy over the effects. But dude, I mean, here we are. It's doing the thing. It's giving me everything that my Mobius gave me and more. Like, I definitely have way more modulation effects on here than I ever had on my Mobius. I felt fairly cornered with it. Although I loved the things that it gave me, my creativity only went so far. But with this, in a shorter time, I've obviously created even more options. And so I think that speaks for itself. So here is the modulation pack number 1 with the Meris LVX. I think it's worth noting too that I might do one for the Mercury X as well. I think the area where that would make the most sense is if there's people who just don't have an LVX but only have a Mercury. Maybe they use the Mercury as their auxiliary unit, but maybe just like, let me know in the comments and let me know if that's something that you actually use or if the Mercury X is actually just your like end of the chain pedal. I don't know how useful it would be having all of this kind of stuff at the end of your chain, but I could do it. So just let me know if you feel like that's something you'd want. All right. Well, thanks for tuning in. That is the Modulation Pack Batch 1.